Welcome. So nice to be back. So grateful. Who is here for the first time? Who is here for the program this weekend? Oh, welcome. Can't wait to connect. So I just wanted to thank my ancestors, my parents, my family. You'll hear a little bit about them in this talk. And also to thank my teachers, especially Roshi, of course. Tonight is a full moon, is actually Guru Purnima, which is celebrated by many in the Indian traditions as the full moon that gives gratitude to spiritual teachers, our spiritual teachers. So I want to thank Roshi, who is watching from her room. As you all know, like Kodo said, we just came back from a long journey. We were in California. Roshi had a heart problem, and she had 2 open heart surgeries. It was unexpected. We thought we were going to be there for just a week, but we were there for a month. So she's recovering, staying internal, and healing. So I'm so grateful to be able to walk with Roshi through these days and learn from her as she went through this. So you'll hear a little bit about this too. And last year, this time, the Wednesday night talk before the Inner Practice of Medicine program with physicians, I was also here in this seat. And last year, this time, I talked a little bit about the 5 remembrances. If you were not here or have not practiced the 5 remembrances, they are reflections on impermanence that Buddhists have practiced with these phrases for thousands of years. And they get deeper as you practice more and more. And I'll read these phrases to you right now. I am of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There's no way to escape ill health. I'm of the nature to die. There's no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There's no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. So last year, I talked about how, as physicians or clinicians, many of us face these truths every day in our work. When we see patients who are old, who might be sick, who might be dying. But because of our training and our conditioning in Western medicine, many of us don't have a view so that we can see these as teachings. And I use the example of the anatomy lab. Many of us have had that experience as physicians or clinicians. It's a rite of passage. This is, for many of us as young medical students, the first time to see a dead body, someone who died, and to learn from this dead body. But because our view is to learn the facts, we don't have that view to see it as a teaching of impermanence. And in fact, we learn how to dissociate from death, dissociate from sickness, and the truth of impermanence that we see. So Last June was this talk. And little did I know, kind of sometimes happens in the Dharma path, is that the Five Remembrances became a constant companion, especially these last 6 months. And especially this last, maybe even just 4 months. So in March this year, the Sunday after one of our programs, I checked my phone and I saw a bunch of missed texts and calls from my core family in Hong Kong. They all live in Hong Kong, my parents, 2 sisters, and a brother. And the texts were all about how my dad is very ill. There are lab tests and different things, and they were discussing what to do. And as I looked at the texts and looked at the lab values, I realized that my father was in fulminant liver failure. His liver was basically non-functional. And so seeing this, I called them and I was like, is he in the hospital? What's going on? They're like, we're just, forcing him to go to the hospital. We're, just getting there. He was very stubborn, even though he was confused. So I realized this was serious. I immediately bought a one-way ticket to Hong Kong. I got Jaya taken care of, my naughty dog. The residents and Kate and other people were so generous to take care of her. And I just flew home, not knowing how long I'll be there. When I got there, he was already in the hospital. He was bright yellow, the color of jaundice, of liver failure. He was confused. And in Hong Kong, because it's such a small place, there's not a lot of chances of getting a liver transplant. So we basically transported him to China across the border. Right before we transported him, this is for you and you'll understand, he had to be intubated. He was on medications to support his blood pressure. It was a 3-hour transfer in an ambulance. I told my family, don't come on the ambulance. I mean, there's not space anyway. I will go because in my head, I thought, this may be bad. And I can deal with it, but I don't want them to see what might happen. And so when we got there, he was put in the ICU right away. Every tube was, put in, and he was on many medications. He was on, dialysis for his kidneys, for his liver, everything. And he was in a coma by then. And I have seen this before. I have seen this in patients. Many patients I've seen die while waiting for a liver transplant. Because, the chances of finding one right when, he's ready to receive it, when his brain function we can see that he doesn't have so much brain damage and he doesn't have a very bad infection. The chances of that was quite small. And so I had gotten into my head that he was not going to make it. But meanwhile, my whole family was in China. We were all staying together. We were all working together to help him get the best chances he can to survive. But because I had gotten into my head that he was not going to make it, I was kind of a downer, as you can imagine. I was, in my head, I thought that I was just trying to be realistic. I wanted my family to be realistic. I wanted, coming from being a physician, we were taught to be realistic with our patients so that they don't have false hope. But then the situation was that we were also doing everything we could to have him survive. So me being this Debbie Downer in the background was not helpful. I was causing more suffering in my family. And I was not, helping in a way that was supportive to my whole family. The first few weeks were really hard because my whole family was together. We were dealing with a medical system that we don't totally understand. It's completely different from Hong Kong, which is more similar to here. Most people then in Guangzhou now speak Mandarin, which is not my native tongue. We were all in an apartment together. Mind you, I haven't lived at home since I was 15, so it was especially hard for me. So there were many times when I was unskillful. But I had my teacher, Roshi. I called her twice a day, once in the morning, once at night, before I went to sleep. It's 12-hour time difference. And at night, I would tell her all the crazy things that had happened, how unskillful I was that day, what stupid things I've said. And then in the morning, it would be having had time to process it. And, I practice at night and in the morning and, discussing, what I have learned. Every day we did this for 6 weeks. And she told me to take notes and write everything down so that I don't lose all of these kind of lessons that I'm learning. And one of the big lessons was how pessimistic I was. It finally came to a head when one of my sisters, Flora, just got sick of me. She just yelled at me, basically, was like, "What are you doing? We're all here trying to help Dad get through this. And you're telling us that this is not going to work? You're like, just putting down our efforts and you're not helping us? What's going on?" And she was just like so pissed and just, and just wouldn't talk to me. That was a hard lesson. And, I talked to Roshi about it and she's like, "Well, she's right. What are you holding on to? What's the story you're attaching to? The story of pessimism, of hopelessness." I was doing all the bad things. Like when someone has a story, they want people to agree with them. You start recruiting people, right? You start like telling people how you feel, trying to convince them that you're right. You're triangulating. I was doing all the bad things. And that happens a lot, in families and in community. You have a story, you want people to be on your side. So Senko his eyebrows coming up, because living in community here too, it's normal. We do that. That's part of being human. But part of the learning is to see the unskillfulness in that kind of action. Yeah, I was not very nice. So I was reflecting on what pessimism really is. A lot of times we say, "Oh, I'm just being realistic," right? That's usually what, when we're pessimistic, it's kind of like, I know it's going to be bad. So, we see that a lot nowadays, in especially a lot of young people who are, seeing what's happening in the world and are just stuck in the pessimism of it all. Our good friend Rebecca Solnit, talks a lot about this. She writes a lot about hope. And she's actually going to give a session on hope on August 31st in the Awareness and Action program. So she'll probably talk about this a bit more. But she says that pessimism is kind of like a sinking ship. And even when we're pessimistic, even when we're faced with the possibility of hope and action, we dismiss it as naive. Those people are just naive. I know what's the real deal. The real deal is I know that this is gonna sink. And we cling to these kind of destructive narratives and the stories of doom and gloom because we want to be the one who knows. She says that it's kind of like not even being able to see lifeboats that are bobbing all around us because we're so attached to this story of sinking ship. And in a way, by doing nothing and also being in this kind of state and also discouraging others by kind of recruiting them into your story of pessimism, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Oh, let's just, this is not going to work anyway. And so that kind of encourages other people to give up on the possibilities of facing uncertainty, because uncertainty brings possibility. And that was the state I was in. I'd rather hedge my bet on my father not making it than be naive and be wrong. Yeah, my excuse was just to be realistic. I want my family to be realistic. I don't want them to be hurt. That doesn't really make sense now, but it kind of was the state I was in. And, as, physicians, we know also we're trained to do this. There's a term nocebo, which is kind of the opposite of placebo, where we're basically just bringing on the doom and gloom because we're taught to present with expertise and to know what's bad, but to not give room for hope or uncertainty. Because we don't know how to say, I don't know, right? So that brings me back to the 5 remembrances. A lot of times people think that practicing with the 5 remembrances is pessimism. Frank Ostaseski has a wonderful program going on right now. I think it's in the last, he's talking about the last remembrance in the coming week. And I was listening to the last one about the 4th remembrance. And someone asked the same question, kind of like, isn't it kind of negative to be, talking about death, that we're going to die, that we're going to be sick, we're going to be old? How is that uplifting? So isn't Buddhism just pessimistic? And to this, and also the related question of our minds are so powerful. If we keep thinking about these negativities, wouldn't we bring them on? So someone asked sort of this question to Frank, and he said, these things are gonna happen, whether you say them or not, right? So it's not our thoughts about them that makes them happen. They just happen, right? These are the facts of life, if you will. So what we're doing is we're addressing these facts. We're coming to term with these facts. We're not necessarily getting warm and fuzzy about them and saying, oh, I hope this happens sooner. But we're not trying to bring them on, but rather we're dealing with the fact that they do exist. And he says, I want to live the whole truth of my life, not just some of it. I'm not trying to scare myself. I just want to live with affinity with the truth, in harmony with the truth. So I use them all the time. So I think what he's saying is that if we look away from these truths, the inherent fear arises because there's a tension that happens between this deep part of us who knows that these things are true, right? And then we're turning away from it and denying it. So pessimism really is getting stuck in the view of suffering, really the first noble truth, right? Suffering, there is suffering, but forgetting about all the other truths. The Buddha gave us 4 truths, not just that one. So in a way, pessimism is forgetting that there is a way out. And when you practice the 5 remembrances, at first it seems like we're just being stuck in suffering. At first it seems like we're just being stuck in the first noble truth too, right? I'm of the nature to grow old. There's no way to escape growing old. But really, when you practice with these phrases more, you'll see the second truth, second noble truth, because you'll run into resistance. Maybe some of you won't, but for me, when I practice with these truths, a natural resistance arises. I'm like, I don't want to grow old. I'm going to get sick. I don't want that. And that resistance shows you the second noble truth. It shows you that the root of suffering is this attachment to our youth, to health, to being alive, to being with our loved ones. So it shows you the second noble truth. And then as you practice with it more, it also shows you the third noble truth, cessation of suffering. You realize that if you are able to not be attached to being young, being healthy, then there's a possibility of cessation of suffering. And being able to accept the truth of impermanence. And then how about the fourth noble truth, the Eightfold Path? As you practice with the 5 remembrances, they can also show you different aspects of the Eightfold Path. For example, right understanding, right? You see clearly that, understanding reality clearly through the view of impermanence. Right mindfulness, becoming aware of impermanence moment by moment. And so it goes. So back to China, where I was talking to Roshi twice a day, practicing with the 5 remembrances as my father was going through this huge journey. And as a family, I finally realized that we were, actually being together as a family is part of that journey. That moment-to-moment love and connection between all of us is part of that journey. And so no matter what happens with my father, we're together as a family and learning together. And when I talk to Roshi, usually her prescription to me is that all that matters is love. So my father actually ended up getting a liver transplant. And then he had to go back in for a second surgery because one of his, the vessels had clotted. And I remember this one moment. He was just starting to wake up more when this second surgery was supposed to happen. He was still intubated. He couldn't move. He couldn't talk. But he was able to open his eyes and sort of know what was going on. And we were supposed to help bring him down to the operating room, together as a family. I remember this moment in the elevator where my father had opened his eyes and he had this look of terror, pure terror in his face. because he didn't totally know what's going on. He kind of knew that he was going into surgery, but he doesn't know what was happening. And that fear, we all saw it, and we were all like, oh no. But then I remembered the Five Remembrances. That helped me kind of let go of that fear at the moment. And I remembered what Roshi said, that all that matters was love. So I remember this moment of leaning down in the elevator. He had his tube in, he was looking up like really scared. I remember looking down and I was like, Dad, you know we love you, right? And he went like this. And that's how he went into the second surgery. It wasn't perfect. I made a lot more mistakes after that, but that was a moment that I will hold on to and remember. I don't know if he remembers, but that's a teaching that I will hold on to when things get hard. All that matters is love. So after this learning in China, again, little did I know I would get another chance to practice with these truths intimately. And even before I got back to China, Roshi had had some event with her heart rhythm. And by the time I got back, we were full on in a diagnostic process and trying to figure out what was going on. And then, of course, the Being with Dying program was going on as well, which was quite perfect. And by the time we ended the Being with Dying program, or in the middle of it, we knew that Roshi had to get open heart surgery. So we went out to Stanford, which was amazing, amazing surgeon and team. All the nurses were just the most caring. It has such a beautiful culture of care. But through this time, again, it was so many up and downs. I was able to observe Roshi going through the different Five Remembrances reflections, in reflecting in her life and her experience through this medical event. I learned a lot observing my beloved teacher facing the truth of growing old, being sick, and seeing her experience pain and suffering without self-pity. And that is a lesson that I will take with me. But also with some humor as well, because we were joking that without self-pity, except for the phlebotomist who comes at 4 a.m. to wake her up and get blood from her. We don't like that one. Maybe a tiny bit of self-pity. And then, facing the possibility of death. After the first surgery, Roshi was very sick for 12 days. Kind of like everything went wrong. She had a GI bleed. She had, her heart rhythm was all over the place. It was really hard. But this time I had the foresight of having been with my father. I tried very hard to not catastrophize. I hope I did okay. Roshi will have to let you know. But then, when we finally realized that she had to go back in for a second surgery, after being so sick for 12 days, it was so scary for me. But that morning when the surgeon came, after Roshi actually had to get another procedure first, and then she was coming out of anesthesia, and then the surgeon came in and was like, we have to do this. I saw her for a split second, was like, and then I saw her relaxing. And I saw her accepting that that was just what needs to be done, even though she doesn't want to. No, none of us want to. But I saw her accepting things as they are. I didn't really accept things as they are as much as, and Kodo was there too, and her sister Verona was there. I think we were more resistant than she was. So that's the first three remembrances: old age, sickness, death. And then I had a chance to face the fourth fear of possibly being separated from my teacher. And just sitting with that. I found both times she was in surgery, I found a quiet space to sit and practice. And it was almost like you're in, facing kind of Schrodinger's cat. You don't know what's happening. It's full on complete uncertainty. And just sitting with that uncertainty of losing my beloved teacher. That was hard, but it's a lesson, also a lesson that I will take with me. And then the fifth remembrance: my actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand. This is also something I learned while observing Roshi. Even while she was so sick during those 12 days, she was connecting with her care team, talking to her nurses, asking them why and how they got into nursing, and just connecting with a deep sense of openness. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't acting good, but from a genuine sense of curiosity. And we heard such beautiful stories. Many of the nurses are either immigrants themselves or the sons and daughters of immigrants to this country. One ICU nurse whose parents were from the Philippines was talking about how his father came when he was younger, and he was born in the U.S. But one time his father took him and the whole family back to the Philippines to see where his father grew up, and it was this very, very simple, just hut, very poor. And he was like, that moment I saw where my father grew up, I knew my life has to be about service. Yeah. So Roshi also talked about dignity. And she said, resistance obliterates dignity. And I was like, what do you mean by that? She said, when you're in the hospital, conventional dignity is out the window. You can't even wipe your but everybody sees you naked, you can't do anything for yourself. That's conventional dignity. But being sick, that doesn't really take away true dignity. True dignity is to not be separate from, not be blocked by shame or resistance to the moment, and just being with what is. You have to be helped. You're just going to be there without resistance, just being with that moment. And I saw that over and over again. So, a little bit from Dogen. Fascicle 93, birth and death in the free from birth and death should understand the meaning of these words. If you search for a Buddha outside of birth and death, it will be like trying to go to the southern country of Yu with your spear pointing to the north, or like trying to see the Big Dipper while you're facing the south. You will cause yourself to remain all the more in birth and death and miss the way of emancipation. So I'll read the Five Remembrances one more time. If you'd like, you can close your eyes and just listen. I am of the nature to grow old. There is no way to escape growing old. I am of the nature to have ill health. There is no way to escape ill health. I am of the nature to die. There is no way to escape death. All that is dear to me and everyone I love are of the nature to change. There is no way to escape being separated from them. My actions are my only true belongings. I cannot escape the consequences of my actions. My actions are the ground upon which I stand.